With an opening commentary, here is Bud Shaw.
Well, here's what I perceive the problem to be between the fans and Paul Dolan. It's not so much the chance of success as much less because of cost cutting. The Indians are favored to win their division for a fourth straight time, after all. And they're only 3 years removed from a World Series. The problem isn't that he's made big promises he isn't keeping either. The Dolans have run the team the same way for 2 decades. The problem is he's cutting salary now while concurrently saying he can't hope to keep Frankie Lindor in 3 years. That's trying to have it both ways, and doing so while the value of his franchise keeps rising. Not paying a player $400 million in this market isn't bad business when you think about it. Not giving your team its best chance to win while you have that player and angering the fan base on the beginning of a new season, that is bad business.
All right, I didn't actually hear the quote, so I don't know the tone that he used. I mean, I read
the I
the
think that's a fair
and
thing to bring up because he has said things in the past like, hey, in our market, we can compete, and then we're going to have to pull back, gather, and compete again, and contend again, not compete.
You only can contend for 2 years
and
at a time.
I know people didn't want to hear it then, and they don't want to hear it now, and they see the franchise value go up from whatever it was when they bought it, $350 million.
Right, to over $1 billion.
And I think whether it was you or not, someone made the point that, you know, well, you only get out of that, you only get your value out of that transaction when you sell it then.
Right.
But the fact is, they are not, when you look at it, that kind of an increase in value, it's hard to claim that you're losing money every year.
Well, people don't understand the cost as it happens, the day-to-day operations. All right, I'll tell you what I think Paul Dolan is guilty of, being too honest. Because he should have had somebody in the PR department craft something, because you know over the next 3 years he's going to be asked about this repeatedly. And also, I mean, so he should have been ready for it. On the other hand, everybody knows the answer. Why would anybody be surprised if he said what he said was, enjoy him while you have him. What he meant is, of course, we can't give him $400 million. Yeah, but why would anybody be surprised?
Because what he's saying is, enjoy him while you have him, but we're not going to add to that enjoyment by keeping the same team together while he's here. We're going to cut that team and bring the salary cap down considerably. Give all these hitters away, all this position players away, and then we're telling you, but enjoy the good player that we're not going to be able to sign in 3 years. I just think it sounds to fans like, well, which is it? How can we enjoy him now when you've just cut payroll the way you have?
But I've asked everybody who's been here, and Jim Ingram was one of them, and Dennis Maniloff, and anybody else who's been here who has espoused basically the same thing you just did, and then I would finish it with, where do you think the Indians are going to finish this year? And the answer to a man was, well, they'll win the division. How do you argue?
Is that the standard? Should that be the standard for a team?
The standard should be win the World Series. Yeah. But you can't compete with New York. How come nobody's saying, you Yankees, you're not going to spend on Lindor? You're not going to.
We don't. Well,
why didn't you go after Machado? Why didn't you go after?
Certainly, they haven't gone as crazy as they used to go. That's for sure.
Well, the numbers have changed.
But I just think, you know, you were this close to a World Series in 2016. You continued to bring in talent in 2017-18. Now you have Ramirez and Lindor together for the next 2 years, and it sounds to me like you're looking to correct the payroll for the next 2 years, even though you know you're not going to be able to keep your star players when their contracts are up.
When the Indians signed, help me out here with the parrot. See how quickly they forget?
Encarnacion.
Yeah, of course, Edwin Encarnacion. When they signed him, 3 years, $20 million a year or so. I think there was $5 million tacked on somewhere else to make it 65. We thought that was an outrageous contract, and we applauded the Indians for doing that. And then, as you say, they corrected it 2 years after.
Yeah, I mean, I think when they made that deal, I remember we went to that press conference and we talked to Chris Antonetti at the time. I can't remember if Paul was there. And that was like, they posed that as a, hey, we're doing this in hope that the excitement and the revenues that it produces help us pay for this. You know, it's not so much just going to the postseason is not going to pay for his salary, which is understandable. You know, I mean, you get money out of the postseason, but you don't get that kind of money out of a $60 million over 3 years.
Right.
So I understand that there's some give and take between attendance in this town and production. and what they're going to be able to do salary-wise. I think the Machado contract, for instance, is a disaster for San Diego.
Correct.
I think in 3 years they're going to be saying what, because I don't think that market has the money to put talent around him to win. That's why I wouldn't blame them for not re-signing Lindor for the numbers that we're seeing, and that's 2 years from now. Those numbers are going to be even higher. Yeah. It's probably going to be a $500 million deal.
But if it's $500 million,
but between now and then, you can't spend for another year or two?
I would think you could, and I would think it would be imperative that you did, because you've got to, just like I mentioned in my opening Truth and Reason, Dan Gilbert got himself a pass because he won. Whether it was LeBron who did it or Kyrie Irving or whoever, that it was done under the auspices of the owner, Dan Gilbert. Now it appears that Dolan, who came pretty close in 2016 to winning it all, and everybody I talked to said that would have bought him the pass in future years. And yet, what are you telling me? Because the rain came up in the 10th inning and they got a bloop hit. That's the difference between being a good owner and a bad owner?
Yeah, I know. It seems like a flimsy measurement of ownership. I get it. And I do think that this ownership has been good for this town, for Major League Baseball. I wrote a long time ago and had a discussion with the Dolan family after I wrote it, because they weren't very happy, saying that they had the money to buy the team, they just don't have the money to operate the team. And they thought that was very unfair. And I think that was back when they didn't re-sign Ramirez. I can't remember exactly, Manny Ramirez, what exactly the situation was. But, I mean, you're right, and when you say that the message from them has not changed the entire time that they've owned the club. Right. They don't have, they're not going to deficit spend, just like, and I know people hate when I mention this, Dick Jacobs never deficit spent. He took what was there, he knocked it down. When I moved into town in '91, his payroll was down to about $8 million a year, and he started building it back up. And fortunately, the new ballpark came and the attendance went crazy for a 5-year period. But he was not going to, believe me, if he was in the same situation the Dolans were in, he wouldn't do anything differently than what they're doing right now. And we don't know about, all these comparisons between Cavs and Indians on social media right now, I just don't even find it interesting enough to join in, because it's such apples and oranges.
I got a phone call the other night, somebody complaining about the Dolans and saying how they let Albert Bell go. Well, they didn't let Albert Bell go. That was still while Dick Jacobs owned the team.
Absolutely.
So what happens is, over the years, they start getting blamed for things that, if you're me, how do you stop that argument that they didn't, that it all started with Albert Bell when clearly it didn't?
No, it didn't, and that was back when they were drawing $3 million a year.
Yeah, every night.
And top in attendance. I don't think you can go very long being top 15 in pay if you're in the were they around 15 or 16 in payroll last year, or 17? I'm not sure what it was, and still lag at 22, 23, 24 in attendance. You can't do it very long, but my point would be, if you only have Lindor, and I think they'll trade Lindor before he walks. So if you only have him for another year or two,
really only have him for 2.
Let's, why not keep the payroll about where it was last year in a town where the excitement is starting to head in another direction with the football team?